so glad that you are here. Welcome to our Deepening Resilient Leadership workshop, which is an interactive workshop where we are going to be exploring, discussing the power of resilience, and then spending time exploring our own roadmap to resilience. And for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Tamara Staton, and I co-founded the Portland chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby in 2012. And then I stepped in as regional coordinator of the Greater Pacific Northwest region. That's a mouthful. 3 years later. And I'm loving my newer role on staff as education and resilience coordinator. And I've been exploring these topics for over 20 years, and I'm eager to share some tools and some ideas that may feel helpful to you in addressing some of the challenges that life and climate leadership presents for that. So I've integrated some time for some quiet personal reflection in this workshop, as well as two actually 10 to 15 minute breakout sessions and a variety of interactive questions for you to respond to in the chat and on screen with your hands, perhaps. I've carved out some specific time for questions towards the end, like I said, but if you do have any questions throughout, just feel free to put them in the chat and Brett can keep me posted. Huge thank you to Brett for supporting us this evening as our tech support. If you find that music helps you concentrate or relax, this is one of my new favorite things on Zoom. Just turn your Pandora or your music on and just have yourself on mute, and then you can listen to music while you're doing some writing. As we said, I guess I didn't say this, you will need some paper and something to write with this evening. So I want to start our workshop in somewhat of a novel way for me. I'm going to play about a minute of a music video. And I invite you to follow my lead on screen and watch the video and get into the groove to the extent that you're comfortable. All right, here we go.
I got this feeling inside my bones. It goes electric wavy when I turn it on. Off from my city, off from my home. We're flying up no ceiling when we in our zone. I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. I feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off of it, moving so phenomenally. You're more like the way we rock it, so don't stop. And under the lights when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. I can't stop the feeling. So just dance.
All right, well, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Why do you think I started with some music? As much as music is super fun, in some ways it sort of feels risky to play a song or a genre that not everyone likes. Like some of you may hate Justin Timberlake, right? I don't know that. So loosen people up, maybe, says Debbie. Let's see, what else are you guys thinking here? Let's see. Now I'm totally out of breath. Like, okay, run a webinar after you dance to become present. Thanks, Amanda. It makes us happy, sets a lighter mood. Awesome. These are great ideas. Perfect to watch me dance. Thank you, Piper, as someone who sends me dance videos. Love that. So yeah, music stimulates us. It primes a positive state. It helps us get back into our body. And perhaps most importantly, and the reason that I want to highlight, by turning on the limbic system, music helps us remember what we're learning by creating longer, lasting, and stickier connections between parts of our brain that we want to associate with one another. Music also puts people on the same emotional wavelength, so it helps us feel connected simply by listening to the same song. And in a nutshell, music is just a really strong avenue for building personal resilience in its ability to tap us into our higher brain and to calm our nervous system. So let's explore that for a few minutes. This idea of resilience and why it matters for us as leaders and climate leaders and advocates. So I'd like to ask you to think for a moment and then share your perspective in the chat. What is resilience to you? What do you think of when you hear the word resilience? Brett's going to pop the question into the chat for you so that you can take a moment to reflect and share. There are a multitude of definitions offered by all sorts of industries, organizations, and businesses, and I'll share my favorite in just a moment. But let's start with your insight. There are no right answers. Just want to get a sense of what's on the top of your mind. To be able to bounce back after a setback, re-energizes from fatigue, weathering the storm, ability to persevere from when things are challenging, bouncing back from anything that happens, something that you need to spend time and build in good times to get through the bad times. Exactly. I got a text message saying, hey, I was going to come, but I'm feeling great, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. But when things are great, that's actually a really great time to take the time to build resilience. So I love what you've added. Thank you for participating. And the variation and also the similarities in your ideas. It's great to see you turning on your brain and being present for this. So according to the Bounce Back Project, resilience is our ability to bounce back from the stresses of life. It's not about avoiding the stress, but learning how to thrive within the stress. So when I hear that definition of resilience, I land in a place of believing that most of us on this call, and even many of the volunteers in CCL and many of the people in our network, are really quite resilient. We work on climate change, many of us, most of us, if not all of us, after all, and we've continued to commit ourselves to what might often feel like an impossible climate solution through incredibly toxic election season on top of an incredibly partisan and divided country even now. All of this on top of any personal and familial and cultural and health challenges that we experience in our daily lives. And yet we're all here on this call, in this organization, in the organizations that you belong to, and so are thousands of active volunteers. So why talk about building resilience when it seems like we're doing just fine? Good question. Glad you asked. Resilience is sort of like emergency exits or the oxygen masks that are hidden in the overhead compartment, if you remember those from airplanes. You don't really think much of them until you need them, but it takes planning and consideration to install them and make sure that they are there for us when the situation calls for it. Last year was a brutal year, and just when many of us hoped that 2021 would bring better, early January happened, right? So many people are doing just fine, even behind closed doors. But for many of us, we suffer under the challenge of being human, of operating with a brain designed to find and highlight the negative in a society that seems designed to do the same. Attempting to do our best to operate and lead from a place of optimism and bipartisanship in an extremely divided society, suffering from centuries of hurt. That's not easy. We are driven, we are committed, and we have a big task ahead of us. And most of us lean on action as the antidote to despair. And yet, many of us still strive for greater ease and peace and fulfillment and laughter and love and connection, and then some. So would any of you like that? Greater ease, peace, fulfillment, laughter, love, connection, perhaps? That's what building resilience is. Integrating more of all of that, all the things that we love. Thank you, Anne. Big old yellow hand. Yeah. Helping your brain and your nervous system to function in a way that supports you and all of your goals. From my perspective, there are so many reasons. I could talk for half an hour about the reasons and the amazing brain, the science behind why build resilience. But for us as climate advocates, leaders, people committed to big things in the world, I want to highlight two key reasons. Number one, climate advocacy can be grueling work, exacerbated by political conditions, societal upheaval, and natural disasters. Resilience is an important component of restoring and maintaining the mental health and the vitality and organizational energy of our volunteers and staff. In other words, building resilience can help each and all of us realize our dream of creating a livable world. We all know that this is the long game. We are more able to bounce back when we are more able to bounce back, I should say, from life's challenges. Success is more available for all of us. So additionally, our own responses to stress and the mood that this response creates, the things that we do and say and the way that we do and say them, all of this directly impacts us. the lives we lead, the ease we experience, the fun we have, and overall the level of fulfillment that we feel. When we intentionally direct our brain and our body in a way that supports optimal functioning, we are simultaneously choosing to support others on their own path to resilience. So let's talk about resilience and as it relates to leadership for a minute. One of my favorite quotes about resilient leadership comes from the Institute for Management Development. Resilient leaders have the ability to sustain their energy level under pressure, to cope with disruptive changes and adapt. They bounce back from setbacks. They also overcome major difficulties without engaging in dysfunctional behavior or harming others. They sustain under pressure. They cope. They adapt. They bounce back. And this part feels key. They overcome difficulties without engaging in dysfunctional behavior or harming others. Definitely not an easy task under pressure and overwhelm. I created a definition and a framework for resilient leadership that is designed to help us recognize and also integrate the various aspects of leadership that can deepen our resilience and support us in being truly effective climate leaders. There are 7 key parts to the resilient leadership framework. In the middle is the resilient leader, or what I like to call the thriving climateer. Sort of like an old school Disney Mouseketeer. Anybody heard of Mouseketeers? With a good bit more climate flavor. Because naturally, play and lightness is a solid part of resilience building, or it can be. If it's not part of yours, I highly recommend it. So this thriving climateer stands solidly in the middle, surrounded by 6 key aspects of resilient leadership development. In the upper left red circle, pink, is leadership development with the goal of becoming an empowering leader. When we empower others, they become part of a more resilient network, and with one which simultaneously serves to empower us and further deepen our own resilience. In the upper right blue circle is facilitation training with the goal of becoming a transformational facilitator. When we have the ability to support others in their transformation, they become more resilient, and again, our own resilience is fortified. In the lower yellow circle is communication practice, with the aim of being an effective communicator. When we truly listen, understand, and respond effectively to others, not only is the relationship fortified, but we are as well. These 3 concentric circles represent the exterior domain of resilient climate leadership. What others see, how others experience us as leaders, how we actually show up in the world, in our meetings, in our conversations, in our experiences. But naturally, what we do and who we are in any particular moment is directly impacted by the inner domain of our experience, by our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, our sensations about what is happening. So this inner domain is represented by that inner trillium. If you're from Oregon, then you might know that the trillium, I think, is our state flower. The orange, the green, and the burgundy were the 3 areas of exterior leadership overlap: social intelligence, emotional resilience, and embodied self-awareness. So if we combine all 6 areas of the framework, then we can see that a thriving climateer is an empowering leader, a transformational facilitator, and an effective communicator who is socially intelligent, emotionally resilient, and attuned to their physical experience. So let's take a deeper look at one of these domains, the empowering leadership domain, and integrate them with some resilient leaders in our own lives. So right now, I invite you to call to mind a leader in your life who has had a deep impact on you and left you feeling empowered. When I think of such a leader in my life, Marley Williams comes to mind. Thank you, George. I find that Marley brings out the best in me. Marley is the founder of the Epic Facilitator Academy. So Marley helps me see the best Marley helps me see what's possible, even when it feels impossible. She helps me to look at things in a different way and really find possibilities where none existed before. That is what empowering leaders do, right? They help us find and locate and access the power that exists inside of each one of us, and they embolden us with motivation and energy and possibility. So I'm going to give you about a minute of silence to reflect on this person and write down exactly what they do or did that feels so empowering for you. What characteristics do they embody? What do they do and say, and how do they say it that leaves you feeling so empowered? Brett will add this prompt to the chat for your reference, and I will start my timer for you. So this is where if you wanted to put on some tunes and mute yourself, you could do that. All right, so go ahead and wrap up those thoughts for just a moment. Now let's explore the interior domain of this person's empowering leadership, social intelligence, and being attuned to one's physical experience. So the empowering leader needs to be well attuned not only to those around her, but also very connected to herself, to her own physical experience. If leaders ignore or regularly misinterpret the perceptions and experiences and needs of those around them, this sort of goes without saying, right? But it will be really challenging to be empowering and resilient. They need to recognize and speak to, and to their best ability, accommodate the needs of those around them. Honing their social intelligence allows that. So I'd like to invite you to reflect on this empowering leader again, and where or how their ability or tendency to attune to you and integrate you and others shines through their actions. What do they do to leave you feeling seen or heard, included, and empowered? I'll give you about 30 seconds to reflect and add a few notes to your paper right now. So similarly, resilient leadership encourages us to integrate our internal bodily experience with our external resilience in the world. So this is harder for us to see from the outside, generally a harder assessment to make of other people. But in checking in with our own experience as leaders, it can be really valuable to notice what our gut says and recognize how often we listen to or ignore that. Knowing specifically where tension lives in our body, what specifically it feels like I've got some tension going on right here. And if I were to be able to stop talking, and I could probably describe it even better. Recognizing that there's direct correlation between what we feel in our bodies and what we experience in our hearts and our minds. Often we try to figure things out from a merely conceptual or mental domain. Raise your hand if you can relate to that, if you happen to be on video right now. But our body has a great deal of intelligence. Our body can tell us a lot. If we just learn to notice and make more choices based upon our physical experience. So building the skill of ongoing self-awareness of our physical experience can really help us access the true cause of the tightness in our shoulders or where the butterflies in our stomach really come from in any particular moment. So according to Amanda Blake, one of my faves, in her book, The Body is the Brain, our body is our biggest emotional and sensory organ, and it can be a huge asset on our path to resilience. So in that vein, you know me, I like to mix things up a bit on Zoom calls. It's pretty easy to just listen to my words that advise you to grow your awareness, but it's another thing altogether to actually practice it. So let's do that if you're up for it. Challenge by choice in all of the webinars and such that I lead, but I promise you'll get more out of this workshop if you're up for playing along a little bit. So first of all, if you are on video now and you're more comfortable turning your video off for this practice, feel free to do that. I'm just going to walk you through a very simple practice of tuning into your heart. So go ahead and take a moment to feel the beating of your heart. I find that it helps me to do this if I close my eyes or if I soften my gaze, but do whatever is most comfortable for you and helps you relax a bit and really tune into that feeling. You might even choose to take a couple of long, slow breaths. That might help. It generally takes most of us a few moments to actually tune into this normally subconscious occurrence that's happening in our body. So give yourselves a few to find it if you're struggling. And if you are struggling to find the heartbeat, you might try putting your hand over your heart or doing something simple to get your heart beating faster and harder, like jumping jacks or running in place, or maybe even leading a webinar. That might get your heart moving a little bit too. There's definitely no one right way to find your heart. Once you've found that feeling of your heart in your chest, see if there's anywhere else in your body that you can feel that sensation of your beating heart. I often notice it in the upper left of my chest, or maybe even in my neck. Sometimes I can feel it in my hands or in my feet, or like right here in the center of my chest. And while you're sensing, looking for those sensations, notice what else you become aware of in your body. I notice my feet are cold, like the ends of my toes, especially the outsides. And my hands are a little bit clammy. Maybe you notice some tension in your shoulders or in your jaw and your neck. If you want, you can be intentional about just letting go of that, or you can just notice. It's totally up to you. When you're ready to come back to the group, just go ahead and take another couple of slow, easy breaths and begin to return your attention back to the screen. And Brett, you can stop that share if you would. If you have been off screen and you're up for turning your camera on, I would love to see all of you. And I didn't get a chance to really just absorb everybody who's here. And I'm so glad and so grateful that you're all here tonight. So thank you so much for being here with us and with me. So great to see your faces. So many familiar faces. It's awesome. So I'm curious how that was for people. So if you're willing to share, will you pop some words or a phrase or short sentence into the chat to let us know about your experience a bit? What felt hard or challenging or relaxing? How easy was it for you to find your heartbeat? Or what else did you notice in that process? So thank you for playing along. I'll give you another opportunity to play later. But I want to give you an opportunity to bring this home a little bit more, to really connect it to your own climate leadership, if that's your thing, or specifically the CCL and your teams that you might be a part of. So in just a minute, you're going to have the opportunity to discuss in randomized groups of three to four, one or both of the following questions, depending on what your group decides. How can deepening our resilience as leaders, as advocates, help you meet our goals as an organization? Whatever organization, if you're not with CCL, whatever organization you are with. And are there any particular areas of resilient leadership that, if you were to develop further, might support you in being more effective or contributing to a stronger team? Thanks, Debbie. So for the first half of this workshop, we've been mostly focused on identifying the specific aspects of resilient leadership and exploring some of the key development areas that can help us get there. So this is a great place to start, and with some quality self-reflection and assessment tools, which I'll talk about towards the end, this understanding can really help us focus our attention. So what I'd like to do now is delve further into the process of deepening our own resilience to really highlight some ideas and some possibilities that can give each of us a better idea for how to explore and develop our own roadmap to resilience, as I like to call it. So we're all different, right? It totally goes without saying, but knowing what works for us as individuals, accepting that, and doing more to create such opportunities are the basic building blocks of personal resilience. If you remember nothing else from this workshop, I'd love for you to walk away with that, and I'll say it again. Knowing what works for us as an individual and accepting that, like fully, really accepting, like I need to take bubble baths every Tuesday, just really embracing that and doing more to create such opportunities are the basic building blocks of building resilience. So to illustrate this point further, how many of you on this call right now love Dave Matthews? Raise your hand. Like to the point where you could listen to his music for hours on end, day after day, week after week, and keep coming back for more. My daughter comes in like, you're still listening to Dave Matthews? I'm like, yeah, it helps. It just does it for me, right? He does it for me, the music. So if we zoom out of it, who here loves their music, whatever music it is? Who here loves their music loud, like to the point where you are pretty confident that you shouldn't listen to it that loud, but for the future benefit of your hearing, but it feels so good to have it loud that you end up listening to it loud anyway because it feels so good, right? So just a handful of us, like maybe 8 or something. Okay. Who are the meditators out there? Those of you who know with every cell in your body that meditation works for you and you can sit for 5 or 10 or 20 or 80, 100 minutes, 80, 100, right? Any of those out there? Yeah, I'm getting some ants. Okay. Runners in the group, walkers. So yeah, we're all different, right? There's all sorts of us. We didn't even need to do that, but that's fun, right? Because you got to be able to raise your hand on Zoom at least once. So I really wanted to just highlight that we each have things that light us up. And as we have explored on past workshops of mine where we were talking about our own play personality, I think we talked about play personality in my self-care workshop last year. So we have things that not only light us up, but the things that really help us get back on the horse when things feel really, really hard. So for me, as an example, I have learned that when life feels really hard and I feel like I'm about to explode, it can work really well for me to throw on my running shoes, strap my dog to my waist, like literally turn on one of my favorite Peloton outdoor workouts with high energy music on really loud, as you saw, and run into the forest. I wasn't always a runner. In fact, I used to hate running, and I still sort of do hate running. But I've learned that when I'm moving my body to really loud music that I love, and when I'm exercising because I know it will light me up and inspire me or calm me down and give me perspective, not because I have to lose weight or something, that is when I thrive. So when I do this on a regular basis, I am less reactive and more responsive. But none of us can do this all the time, right? I can't go running all the time. I don't want to. If I do it more than 3 days a week, I burn out on it and then I give up. It's cold, dark, and rainy here in Portland in the winter. And sometimes I just can't force myself out. Or sometimes my daughter is super whiny and she doesn't want me to go, or she wants to go with me. Sometimes she doesn't want me to leave. Sometimes I don't feel like being in action. Sometimes I just want to lean on chocolate and Netflix for a quick fix. I'm sure some of you can relate. So I wonder, is there something in the middle, something that I can lean on that doesn't require me to force myself into a different state or cause me to regret the actions I choose, but that instead allows me to honor my experience and ease into a different state that benefits me and others in the long run? Why, yes. Why, yes. Glad I asked. So as a part of my answer to that question, I would like to share a very brief overview and perhaps for some of you, a reminder of how our nervous system works as mammals. I find that having a really simple visual framework helps me in those moments when I'm feeling less resilient, helping me to choose from a variety of activities and giving me more options for exploring my own roadmap to resilience. So to kick things off, thank you, Brett, I want to share the polyvagal chart, which is a common graphic representation of the polyvagal theory developed by Stephen Porges. Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have heard of Porges on this call? All right, awesome, that's exciting. How many of you, actually, I'm not gonna ask that question. Porges' work with the vagus nerve expanded the research on the nervous system, specifically identifying a third type of nervous system response that he calls the social engagement system. So why do we care about this third nervous system response as CCLers committed to bipartisan climate solutions? Because it's this system that actually allows us to build and sustain functioning, fulfilling relationships. It's from this place that we listen openly to those different perspectives, because it's this part of the nervous system that breeds our curiosity and ability to truly connect with people. If we know ourselves well enough to understand what happens when and why, then it becomes easier to take actions that help us stay in and return to this place of calm connection again and again and again. So what I want you to notice first about this chart are the 3 sections. Starting at the bottom where we're feeling calm and safe, and moving towards the top where our nervous system has been aroused and have ultimately slowed or shut down, immobilized. So at the bottom, grounded green, as I like to call it, the bottom is the place that most of us yearn to be much of the time, the green social engagement system. And when we're operating in that system, our nervous system is supporting us to feel calm and grounded and curious and settled and compassionate and generally at peace. My hope is that most, if not all of you, are in that place right now. It's in this place that we're inspired to do things like supporting a cause that's meaningful to us. That might ring a bell. Drawing or doing something creative, developing a skill or mastering something or being there for a loved one. I notice when I talk more slowly, I can also get there when I'm presenting. Above the social engagement system is the yellow fight or flight and lesser known find or fawn zone. As we become more stressed and our nervous system more aroused, detecting what it believes to be threats to our safety or our well-being, we do things that we think will help us return to that sense of safety. Things like appeasing others, or seeking likes on social media, or seeking quick wins or quick fixes like good online deals or ice cream or chocolate or binge watching our favorite shows. So those are some of the things. It's not the only thing that we do in fight or flight mode. I'm sure you can think of other things. Like when our coping strategies don't seem to be working, we might feel a deeper sense of anxiety, concern, or fear or panic in more of a flight mode, or perhaps more of a sense of irritation or frustration or panic or rage in what people refer to as a fight response. In this zone, we still have the sense that we can, that something can be done, that action can be taken, that success is possible. But the effort here, I want to really highlight the effort here, the presence of possibility and capability isn't without its edge in this yellow space. It's not a calm space to hang out. It's not necessarily negative, but it's not calm. It's not a place of ease and necessarily confidence. That's more down in the grounded area of green social engagement. There is a place, I do want to highlight that you can have this sort of what I like to think of as this lime green section that's not on this chart. It's this this blended section of the fight or flight and social engagement, that place where we're really, really pushing through things, but we're not necessarily, our nervous system isn't on that verge of moving into that immobilization, that red zone. So moving up to that red zone, at some point, things simply become too much for our nervous systems to handle and it shuts down, now in a place of I can't. This is generally a last resort thing. In fact, again, we're talking about gradients. So I would like to add an orange section to this chart, which would be between yellow and red. And freeze, some people say freeze might even be there in that orange section. But when you, generally that red freeze space is generally a last resort thing, unless you've experienced a decent amount of trauma in your life, in which case your system likely has a tendency to shut down more quickly. And working on climate, there's definitely some trauma around that fear that comes up for us, not really knowing what to expect in the future. So in this freeze space, people often feel a sense of helplessness and overwhelm and shame and depression and numbness and maybe a sense of feeling trapped. You go from being over aroused through your sympathetic nervous system in that yellow zone to being under aroused through your parasympathetic nervous system. Para as in parachute, or parar, to stop in Spanish, or for those of you who know her, Madeline Para, who naturally helps us slow down and consider our actions. So now I'd like to give you a bit of time to explore your own roadmap to resilience, to deepen your ability to recognize and offer yourself what you need when you need it, so you can spend as much time as possible in that grounded green zone. So we're going to go over the worksheet, then we're going to do a quick little practice, and then you get some time, a little bit of solo time before then you get to go back to the same groups that you were just with and work through this. So I've created this worksheet for you to use in case it's helpful. I'll walk through this example, and then you'll have time, like I said, with a partner to build out your own. So you'll notice that the title is at the bottom, since that's where it makes the most sense to start, in the green section where you're mindful and conscious. So the question that I invite you to explore for each zone is, how are you? How are you in that zone? And how is the world? So for me, for example, when I'm in the grounded green zone, I am hopeful and I'm excited. And the world is my playground. Not always, of course, but those are just some examples. That's what came to me when I think about being in that space. There are things that naturally bump me out of this zone of curiosity and connection. And those are things that I might think about avoiding or addressing when I can. You can't always avoid those things, of course, but things like lacking trust, reading a ton of bad news, spending a ton of time on the computer for me, fighting with my family, feeling overwhelmed or hopeless, eating lots of junk food. Those are just some examples. So you're going to have your own examples, right? So in the fight or flight zone, I am sometimes angry and the world can be annoying. There are a variety of things that I can do to build resilience and calm my nervous system in that green zone. Singing, dancing, drawing, breathing slowly, supporting a cause I believe in, reading, exercising in a way that I like, journaling, knitting. So things that make me feel safe and secure and connected. And then in the red freeze zone, where I'm more mindless and unconscious. And again, these are autonomic nervous system responses that our nervous system takes us there, right? So by being intentional and noticing, we can do things to help us change our state and ultimately get back down into that grounded green. So in that red freeze zone, I can be overwhelmed and shut down, and the world is just too much. Things that I might choose to do in this section to soothe my nervous system tend to match the mood of my more immobilized state. What I mean by that is like things like breathing deeply and slowly and naming colors in the room and sending love and kindness to people in the world, or people I love. Noticing my hands and my feet and my body. These are things that are often an easier transition than going from frozen and overwhelmed to like dancing and singing. That's usually a hard shift. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's take this live again and put these concepts into practice before I offer you time to consider your own ideas for practices that might work for you. So the last practice that we did a bit ago was more of a noticing practice, a practice to help us grow our awareness for our own body and what's happening inside of it. Definitely a key skill to continue to develop. In a moment, I'm going to invite you to do a practice that has the capacity to slow us down and shift our state, something that can help you move out of a red freeze state or a yellow fight or flight state. So go ahead right now and just make a note, a mental note of your baseline background mood. What are you feeling right now emotionally? You can make a note to yourself in a word or two. You can also notice anything that might be going on in your body, any tension, any stiffness, just generally snapshot about what your current state is. So then I invite you to do this practice along with me. And again, feel free to take yourself off camera if that helps you feel more comfortable. We're just going to be stretching our face. So just start to stretch your jaw a little bit. Open your mouth wide and move the lower part of your jaw. Stick your tongue out maybe. Take some deep breaths while you're doing this too. You might also feel your nose start to squinch up. So just bring your nose and your cheeks into it. Stretching your face. Really like just get all the muscles you can. Don't forget to breathe. So just take some deep breaths while you're doing this. Squint your eyes up. It's like just going all around your face, as many muscles as you can access. Maybe open one eye at a time and look side to side, up and down. Maybe put your tongue in one direction. Really stretching all the muscles in your face. And yes, I am recording this. This is for the benefit of all of those who want to watch me stretch my face, but hopefully you're stretching yours too, because this is for you. Getting all the way up into your forehead, especially, very important. So for those of you who can also move your scalp on with just your muscles, you can do that, and your ears, you can wiggle your ears. Keep stretching and squinching and breathing. And somewhere in the next 1 or 2 out breaths, you can just bring that to a close. And as you're bringing it to a close, just begin to notice your mood and anything else that might have shifted for you in your body. What can often happen for people is that it can energize people, and it can also, people find that they tend to relax. And according to Stephen Porges, there's a whole neurobiology behind what we just did, except for the eye movement part. There's probably neurobiology behind the eye movement part, but everything else aside from the eye movements was sending information into the ventral vagal. Will you stop that share for me, Brad? Thank you. If you want to come back on video, I would love to see your face, but of course there's no obligation. So everything else that we were doing, stretching our face and our forehead and our ears and things like that, was sending information to the ventral vagal complex. That's what we were talking about, that polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve that runs down. In the interactive training that I created, there's a picture of it actually. So when the ventral vagal nerve complex gets stimulated, it ends up impacting our sense of well-being and our resilience. And so the major sensory inputs that the major one of the major ways to access the vagus nerve is comes from what's called this trigeminal nerve. I was not sure if I should put that fancy word in here and share it with you, but I just learned what it is. And it's this nerve bundle that starts here, and it moves basically through our face, into our mouth, into our forehead, into our nose, into our jaw. And so it's really close to the surface. So you can do pressure points in your face that really helps access that and really stimulate vagal activity. Stretching your face, doing forehead massages, that's actually going to change your vagus nerve, the vagal activity, just by doing those things. And things like chewing and moving those muscles is part of the same circuit in that. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just begin to map out, also an option, but might just be easiest to take on your piece of paper, just sketch out 3 boxes, really easy. A green box, social engagement at the bottom, a fight or flight box, and a freeze box. I recognize most of you probably do not have colors on your desk. Maybe if you do, you could do the colors, but 3 boxes, super simple. And just begin to consider what bumps you out of the green zone. So for you, what types of things bump you into the yellow? So you can see my examples. Maybe some of those are what also bump you out of your green zone. And then you can also ask yourself, in that green zone, I am blank. So for me, I am hopeful and excited. Those might be your words too, but they might be different. And the world is my what? The world is blank. I'm sorry, I said my playground. I was sort of going outside the bounds, but the world is beautiful. The world is wonderful. The world is optimistic, right? And then do that same thing with the yellow fight or flight zone. A little bit different though. What can I do to build resilience in return to the social engagement zone? Things that for you would really help you move back down to grounded green, and so forth. Does that make more sense, Jeff? So before we wrap up our focus time on resilience this evening, I would like to share a few resources with you and let you know about some opportunities should you be interested. As I've said, I've just scratched the surface. We have just scratched the surface here with the content that I shared with you tonight. It was challenging to pick what to share, but I have created some resources so that you can get more of the same or similar if you'd like. So we have, like I said earlier, in the evening, we have created a resilience hub on CCL community. I'm sure Brett would be willing to drop that in the chat again, but it's super easy to find. You just search resilience in the search bar on community.citizensclimate.org, and it comes right up at the top. Resilience hub definitely comes towards the top. And you will find all sorts of resilience building resources categorized by type, including documents, trainings, groups. We have a resilience building action team. And soon I am working on a simple practice opportunities, like something you can do in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And we are doing a redesign of the Resilience Hub. So I'm very excited about that. Feel free to check back often, because that will be updated with new opportunities. I'm also excited to have just finished, like today at 3 o'clock, just finished creating an engaging online training out of this workshop, which contains some additional content that we didn't have time for this evening, including the Resilient Leadership Self-Assessment for you to use to assess your own strengths and opportunities for resilient leadership development. I would love for you to go and check it out and let me know what you think, because it's really in early stages. It's ready for you to use and try out and see if it's accurate. I think it's accurate, but we'll see. I'd love your feedback. So please don't offer. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly or personally with any questions or thoughts or ideas. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be with you. Thanks for being so committed to yourselves and your resilience and your people and your networks. And have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.